you don't leave a holiday and then drop back down to normal. You actually leave a holiday and then all the worlds have risen. Now you have to reach up for a new level of holiness from what becomes normal, right? The level of holiness of each holiday, now that becomes the new normal for the world. The world doesn't drop in holiness. But now the next holiday is a new level, right? So keep in mind, it's not the journey's not like this, and then you have a holiday, and then back down, and then a holiday, back down. It's just constant upward, right? We get to Rosh Hashanah, oh, now that's a new normal, and now we reach for the next, now Sukkot goes up even more, right? So
Your mic can't see it.
oh, okay.
So on that same note, I went to a funeral yesterday of a woman that was died on the last night of Hanukkah
Yeah.
at 98,
Well,
and the next day was her 99th birthday.
uh-huh.
So that's a nice life, huh?
Sure.
Died
What a
into
blessing.
full lives.
Yeah. So we're holding just at the beginning of chapter 10. If you're watching online, hello. We're in Lessons in Tanya, this edition, page 151. It's just, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, we did a big review of chapters 1 through 8. So that's the whole anatomy of the soul, the powers of the soul, the garments of the soul, the concept of two souls, as well as how it extends into the world in terms of klipa and sitra achra. So now all terms I hope we're getting familiar with in terms of the structure of the soul and the aspects that we have to master and work with. Then chapter 9, we started to look at, now how do we put this into action? What's going on in my being? We looked at the headquarters of the nefesh elokit, the godly soul, and the headquarters of the nefesh ba'amit, the animal soul. Right? The animal soul is housed where in my being? Left ventricle, and the blood, we say. Nefesh elokit is most comfortable where? In the brain. It's an intellectual, it's godly, but it relates to intellectual energy more easily, and from there extends to where? Very good, the right ventricle. And that's where the battle front, where these two souls are really struggling for who's going to drive the car, who's going to make the decisions in my life. Is it going to be about this, or is it going to be about this? And in the end, every thought, conscious thought that I have on a sustained basis, right? Not everything that pops into my mind, but everything that I seize on and start to think about actively as an action, everything that I say and everything that I do, it's coming ultimately from one or the other. So categorizing that and becoming aware of that, that's a form of mindfulness that's very important for this technique. That in life, as I go through life, I start to track, okay, who's talking now? Who's thinking now? Who's doing this? And later we get to, okay, now what do I do about it? How do I try and tilt the balance towards nefesh elokit? So that's the battle in the being. I am considered like a city, and they're like two rulers that are fighting over that city. And neither of them wants to give an inch. It's all or nothing on either side. And then finally we looked at what the nefesh ba'amit would like to do in its highest dreams. Its great success would be to flow through everything. So seichel, intellect, emotions, thought, speech, and action, it would all flow with the directives of the other-centered soul. And not only that, but even the urge to perhaps go back to nefesh ba'amit, that would all be stripped of any possible focus. It's called its unclean garments, right? If all my life I like brownies, as I often say, then I'm just going to not eat brownies for a year, and eventually I'm going to stop thinking about brownies, and that energy that I have about, oh, wake up, have a brownie, is going to now be available for whatever else nefesh elokit would like, right? Nothing wrong with brownies, but I'm eating them for me because I like them. That's strengthening nefesh ba'amit. Obviously, fully counterproductive things that are stealing, murdering, that's in that category too. But here we're talking about klipas noga. We're talking about things that are permitted, but I'm doing them out of a nefesh ba'amit drive. I'm stripping even that so that the nefesh ba'amit, its drive, can now be reclaimed for the compass bearing of nefesh elokit. And finally, at the end of the chapter, we looked at this parable from the Zohar, where we reframed the nature of nefesh ba'amit to begin with. That we don't see it as some in the wider community do, as an enemy, as something that's against godliness, as something that's evil at its core. We really see it, I like to describe it as my sparring partner. And if I'm preparing for a big match of some kind, my coach is going to hire me a sparring partner that kind of puts the fear of combat into me, and who can really stand up to me, who can knock me around, and that will make me stronger so that I'll be prepared for my match that I've accepted, and I'll succeed. So although someone walking into the gym will look and see this guy knocking me around and think that's my enemy, in fact, this person is helping me, and this person wants me to overcome them. Same thing with Nefesh Bamit. We had this parable of the harlot, and even though this woman in the story wanted, and you can listen last week, wanted the prince to fail and be seduced, on the outside, her true intent was she's working for the king, and although she's doing everything she can to get this prince to fail, she wants the prince to overcome and resist and do the right thing. And the same thing with our Nefesh Bamit. Our Nefesh Bamit will never be happy if we give into it. Ultimately, there's always going to be this discord in our being, because Nefesh Elokit does not transform or go away, it just goes dormant. Right? Nefesh Elokit cannot be transformed to Nefesh Bamit, it just becomes trapped, as it were, in Nefesh Bamit consciousness, but the Chokhmah of Nefesh Elokit can never be trapped within Nefesh Bamit. It's always there, perhaps dormant, perhaps not ever conscious in my mind, but it won't go away. So Nefesh Bamit's never going to be happy, because that Chokhmah of Nefesh Elokit is always going to be there just waiting to wake up. The opposite, however, Nefesh Bamit, once it's transformed and that energy is moving towards the compass bearing of Nefesh Elokit, now it can be very satisfied and happy and have the same pleasure and even higher pleasures, and just not get in the way of the aims of my other-centered aspects. Then we go to chapter 10. Here we started looking at the nature of this fellow that's tzaddik, or this woman that's tzaddik, and what that is, which we looked a little in the earlier chapters. And on the one hand, we talked about that a tzaddik is one that doesn't just stop the activities of the animal soul and not let it express in thought, speech, and action, but it actually suppresses it to the point where it's dormant. Right? So I might walk around and always think and say and do the right thing. I'm not, but I might do that. We could all achieve that. Doesn't make me a tzaddik, because a silly idea will pop into my mind, and I'll have to say, no, I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to do it. I could walk around, and on my exterior, I could look like a tzaddik 24/7 every day of the year. But I still have that urge. I still have that sense like, I'd like to do this. I'd like to think about this. I'd like to tell this person off. I don't ever let it happen. That's not a tzaddik. That's something else. The tzaddik is someone who, in this war, the Nefesh Elokit has created a love and an awe, but primarily a love we're talking about right now, so powerful in the right side of the heart that it just flows into the left side and causes that potential of Nefesh Bamit to become dormant.
You said you look like a tzaddik. What does a tzaddik look like?
I look like a tzaddik in terms of behavior. So if I made a list, everything I thought, everything I said, everything I did, then all of it would come from Nefesh Elokit. Check, 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 check. No variation, right? Okay, it popped in my mind, this guy's, I really want to tell, no, okay, that's just self-centered talk. I'm not going to think about it, I'm not going to do it. It may have popped into my mind, and I just resisted. I didn't let it express as conscious thought. So outside, meaning my conscious thought, my speech, and my action. Inside, meaning my 10 sefirot of Nefesh Elokit and Nefesh Bamit. Nefesh Bamit still has the 10 sefirot running around, sending ideas up to my brain. I can't transform that necessarily. But on my outside, thought, speech, and action, now I can. I'm not talking about my physical appearance. That doesn't have to do with it. Does that answer your question? Kinda. Well, I'll settle for kinda. Kinda is pretty good for my record.
It's a good start.
And also, as we're looking at this topic of what is a tzaddik, right? And so just to finish the thought, we talked about the microphone moment, right? We were all in this room. We've been in this room for a long time. No one thinks, wow, I'd like to eat that microphone. Wow, I'd like to flirt with that microphone. Wow, whatever. I'd like to yell at that microphone, right? It's a microphone. It wouldn't occur to me that's not an urge, right? So that state, that's what's happening with the tzaddik all the time with everything, right? Find your most annoying scenario that triggers you the most, where you just behave the worst in your life, and every time you go into it, boom, I don't know who that was, but that was definitely self-centered, right? For tzaddik, it's like that microphone. Why would I yell at that microphone, right? Find, the night where I was emotional eating with the most sense of self-centered need, and I was just going to the fridge, and I'm not hungry, and I don't care, and I'm just going to put ice cream in a bowl with cookies, with brownies, and I just, right? For tzaddik, why would I eat a microphone? Why would I do that, right? The only reason I need to eat is to do good things and help people. So somehow a tzaddik is not transformed, has made nefesh b'mid dormant to the point where every stumbling block that you and I would experience in the world is just basically like that microphone. I'm not angry at it, I'm not flirting with it, I don't want to eat it. It's just there, neutral. It would never even occur to me. It's not a struggle. Whereas for us, of course, in life, find your own trigger moments. We have lots of struggles, and our work is actually to just suppress, for starters, nefesh b'mid, so it doesn't express as active thought, speech, or action. Now, why in a sefer shel Beinoni, where we're learning how to be a Beinoni, why are we talking about a tzaddik, which is this rare individual, which most people can't attain that level? We talked last week that we can benefit from understanding the phenomena, because I can take aspects of my life where I'm functioning like ordinary Russia, and I can move it close to how a tzaddik would relate to it. Of course, it doesn't make me a tzaddik. I'm not changing my definition. But I can say, okay, in my life, this is a real problem. This is the most stressful or problematic aspect of my life. Let me focus on it. And I have a mashpia who helps me find ways to apply these strategies to any particular phenomenon in my life. And just take it and try and move it from, I'm acting pretty much like an ordinary Russia, and try and move it to at least a Beinoni. And maybe even relate to it in some ways like a tzaddik would, right? Like now I've taken this negative energy, not only have I suppressed it, now not only is it just neutral and doesn't occur to me, but now I feel like that energy is in my life and I can use it for something positive, right? I can even be in the environment of it and I can use it for positive. So we can actually learn from the dynamic of a tzaddik by, in limited ways, aiming for that dynamic in parts of our lives. But please don't think that makes you a tzaddik. If I used to do something that was counterproductive and now I've changed it. Now that's just growth. It's called spiritual growth. As Reformed Jews, we want to grow and work and learn. And the second reason that it's in the book is we want to keep in mind historically who the Alter Rebbe's students were, which is really something to understand. That he had many, many followers all across this area of Russia and Europe, common people and ordinary people like us, but also he had some of the most eminent scholars from the whole region, from the Jewish world, that would come and be his students. And these were people who, just to enter into his lowest level yeshiva, his lowest level class, for starters, you had to master all of both Talmuds, the Zohar, a lot of the works of Musar, and a lot of the works of philosophy, and obviously with great mastery. Right? So what we would call a world-class scholar, what we would call a real exceptional leader and teacher at a world level, these were his entry-level students. And from there you go up and up and up. And so for some of these people, the distinction between a complete tzaddik and an incomplete tzaddik and a Beinoni and a tzaddik, these were real distinctions that they were grappling with. So we should know that the Alter Rebbe was a great mystical leader and a teacher of people of this level. So that was something relevant for students for whom he wrote this book.
Do you know anything about how did the Alter Rebbe get to be in his position, and what was his background?
Yeah, you can learn a little more. You know what? The first class didn't get recorded. I'm sorry. If we go back to the first class, actually, we hadn't been taping it. But I gave a little bit of his story. But he was just a genius's genius, basically from birth, who at every point in his life was described as he could just see through the entire Torah from the top to the bottom, beginning to the end, with no barriers, with no limits, and also a spiritual giant who was just when he tried to write down the word Atzilus to talk about the highest spiritual world, he'd put the first letter down and he'd go into Dvekus, and they'd wake him up a half an hour later because he was wandering around in that level, right? So just an extraordinary, unique soul, what we call a new soul in Judaism, who take the most breathtaking spiritual geniuses of his time. They just looked at him and said, "Let me learn with you," right? So it was evident from the beginning that he was that kind of person. And as a student of the Maggid of Mizrich, who was the Baal Shem Tov's disciple, he developed a system of Kabbalah that expressed itself in a way that the intellect could absorb. So now the secret stuff of Kabbalah is expressed in a Hasidic way where we can sit and talk about it and understand it and somehow get our mind to leap above what should be possible for thought to grasp.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's pick up. We are page 151. Ve'ein hara nepach letov mamash, right in the middle of the page there. You got us? Here.
Gotcha. As to one who achieves this goal but finds that the evil has nevertheless not actually been converted into good, in which case his entire capacity for desire would now be directed only toward good and holiness, since with him this is not the case.
So we're talking about a person who eradicated the evil from their midst, who banished the evil from the left part of their heart, and we're saying evil as in any subtle self-centeredness, so not necessarily killing or stealing, just any self-centeredness. They completely nullified it, washed it out, made it dormant. But if somebody didn't do that, if there's still this little sorry, I misspoke. The earlier example was someone that actually did eradicate it totally. So not just dormant, but gone. Yeah, so pardon me. Right, so a complete tzaddik is one who actually takes it and is completely 100% gone and transforms it. And here we're saying someone who actually didn't completely do that, but finds that even though it's dormant, there's still a little bit left over, even though it can't express. Nikra tzaddik she'eno gamur.
He's called an incomplete tzaddik.
That's our definition of an incomplete tzaddik. So the incomplete tzaddik has actually overcome and overwhelmed nefesh b'amit so that it can't express. But even though it can't express, it's still there. Like, I'm either in my house sleeping or I'd be kicked out of my house. Either way, same result in the house. I'm not talking, I'm not doing anything, I'm not turning the lights off and on, I'm sleeping. I'm not affecting the house, but I'm still in the house. Right? A complete tzaddik has taken that energy and it's not in the house anymore. They've completely washed it out and it's 100% gone. וצדיק ורע לו, דהיינו שיש בו עדיין מעט מזה רע בחלל השמאלי.
He is also called a tzaddik who knows evil, meaning that some vestige of evil still lingers within him in the left part of his heart.
So if you remember, there were these 5 terms, right? And then there were 2 sets of terms for the Rasha and for the tzaddik. So there's tzaddik, a complete tzaddik and an incomplete tzaddik, and there's a tzaddik that knows good and a tzaddik that knows evil. And same thing with the Rasha, complete and incomplete Rasha, and a Rasha that knows good and a Rasha that knows evil, and then there's a Beinoni. So I guess that makes 9 terms total. And we kind of talked about them a little in the first chapter. Now we're going to define them with the knowledge from chapters 1 to 8 in our minds. So the tzaddik who knows evil, that means that there's just a little bit of that residue left in the left part of their heart. Nefesh b'amid can't express, and it may have been transformed to some extent, but there's still some left there. Even though it's dormant, it's napping, it can't express, it still could wake up. It still has potential. That's the incomplete tzaddik. Sorry, that's the tzaddik that knows evil. Ela shekafuf uvatel latov mechamat miuto.
Except that it finds no expression at all, not even in evil desires, because the evil, by reason of its minuteness, is subjugated and nullified by the good and cannot therefore be searched.
So there's a term we hear a lot, bitul, or levatel, to be nullified. And in this case, that that residue, that subtle leftover of that nefesh b'mit drive is there, but it's been nullified. And later on we'll use the analogy of food, that in the world of kashrut, if I have a pot of chicken soup and oops, one drop of milk splashes out of a cup and lands in the pot of chicken soup, it doesn't make the whole pot of chicken soup now non-kosher. If it's less than 1 in 60, you say it's not significant. It's nullified by the larger amount of soup. So you can actually still eat it. It's perfectly kosher. There's no issue whatsoever. It's like it's not there. It's not significant. Same thing happens with nefesh elokit and nefesh b'amit. If I have enough of that love from nefesh elokit that overflows the heart and flows into the left side, so that, there's still like a drop of nefesh b'amit drive left in there, but it doesn't express, it's dormant, it's insignificant, we say it's nullified. And even the person themselves wouldn't sense it. They still, in their inside, in their experience, there's no difference between them and a complete tzaddik from that perspective. Right? They never have a counterproductive urge. They never have a sense that they want to do the wrong thing. They can look back at a week, on a Friday and say, okay, pretty much all my instincts were right on. All the things that occurred to me were productive, and I behave like a tzaddik would behave, even on the inside. But even they don't sense there's still a little bit, a minute trace of that nefesh b'amit that's dormant. They haven't completely transformed it 100%. That's the incomplete tzaddik. ולכן נדמה לו כי ויגרשהו וילך לו כולו לגמרי.
Hence he, the tzaddik, may imagine that he has driven it out and it has quite disappeared.
So they could really, that's why at the beginning we said, Rabbah said, for instance, I'm a Beinoni. Right? Because he knew that even though he looked inside and he thought, felt, acted like a tzaddik all the time, he could still not be aware that there was some trace left over. And that's why he made the mistake of saying, I could be a Beinoni. Right? It was an error, but it was an error based on a deep understanding that even an incomplete tzaddik is not aware of that leftover trace. It's not consciously affecting them. אבל באמת, אילו חלף והלך לו לגמרי, כל הרע שבו היה נהפך לטוב ממש.
In truth, however, had all the evil in him departed and disappeared, it would have been converted into an actual good.
It's a big point that's happening here. Even though they have the same experience, that nefesh b'amit doesn't bother them. They don't have any triggering moments. They don't have any moments where something occurs to them and they just have to say, that would be a mistake, right? That would be wrong.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah?
Isn't that person kind of missing something? How can other people relate to him? It's like he is missing the idea of evil, and therefore...
Yeah, and we will address that quite thoroughly in future chapters. I don't want to get into that question now, but you're raising an absolutely valid point. This is not someone that we can relate to, and this is not someone that does the same work that we do typically. And our work is of value and is different than their work. And yes, it is something we can't relate to, except as we learned in chapter 3, was it? Chapter 2, the nature of the divine soul is that each one of us is a spark in a greater soul. So even though I can't relate to this person's personality, I know that somewhere up in my general soul, there's a tzaddik that I'm a part of their soul, and I'm like a cell in their body, so to speak, and that spiritually the Jewish people are all one being. So even though the cell on my finger can't necessarily relate to who it is to be Michael, it is me, right? So it doesn't have to relate on a cellular level to what it means to be a human being and to have free will. But look, it's me. When I make a choice, so does my finger.
But
So
the tzaddik can relate to us. He knows. I don't understand.
I have to assume yes, but I don't know what it's like to be a tzaddik, so I can't answer that. Yeah, but it's a sidebar which is important. But I don't want to go down that road now. It is addressed in the future. But what's happening here is when they make that tiny last step, not a tiny step, but a subtle, we're splitting hairs here, but when an incomplete tzaddik takes the fumes from nefesh b'amit and just transforms the last bit of it, so it's absolutely nothing left, something happens, something flips. And it has to do with the two types of love we learned in the last chapter. Right? There's ava kirish be'esh, the love that's like burning coals, where my sense is I'm reaching for something, for this Ein Sof, and I want to get closer, and it's this fiery love that makes me almost uncomfortable, and there's a pain involved, that I want to bridge that divide. And the closer I get, the further I feel. Right? That's one aspect of love that's like fire. And the second love, the higher love, ava shebetanugim, a love like delights, which is more like water, which is a higher level of love where I'm experiencing a delight, a higher level delight of oneness with the Ein Sof. So I'm no longer trying to cross a divide, I'm no longer trying to reach, I'm experiencing somehow godliness and a higher level love. And they're two discrete types of love, and they don't overlap. It's not like, well, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Really, they're different states of consciousness. The incomplete tzaddik is all about the fiery love, right? There's still a them, even though it's subtle. There's still a nefesh b'amid in there that may not be conscious, but because that center is there, they're always it's them trying to get to godliness. It's them trying to get to the Ein Sof. So that's why their love is the fiery love. When they actually transform that last remnant and there's nothing left, now there's no me to want to reach God. There's no me to want to experience godliness. There's no me to want to enjoy closeness with godliness. I basically now have two nefesh elokits. Nefesh b'amid now becomes a second nefesh elokit. And so there's no me to experience this fiery love that wants to reach godliness because I'm nullified. So when that happens, now the complete tzaddik, we understand, experiences a love that's called a love of delights, which is just, oh, God wants this. What a delight, right? Am I close to God or not to God? Who's asking that question? There's nobody asking that question anymore. So there's no more fiery love. It's just, does God want me to stay up all night and help this person and be sleepless and not feel spiritual and feel tired and feel whatever? Good. That's what God wants of me. Why? Who else is making any decisions here? What a delight. I'm close to God by staying up all night helping this person in the hospital or this friend. So they're no longer seeking this spiritual experience, so that it's no longer a fiery love, it's actually a total oneness with Ein Sof. That's the flip that happens on the inside from a incomplete tzaddik to a complete tzaddik.
God himself, we can relate to him in the Torah because he does things that people will do, like the golden calf. He comes down and he's ready to murder all of us. And Moses talks him out of doing it. So he has God has this ability to do negative things. And yet he's God. And so people that are trying to be without that spirit, why? If God has it, why is it that important that a tzaddik doesn't have it?
Okay, you're in a very profound state this morning, and you're raising some really amazing questions. Well, we have talked about that in particular in the past, where we say when we read something like God gets angry, the Hebrew is different than the English, and it's not anger like you and I would say anger. It's a different state. Okay. I hear your point. I don't want to rehash that explanation now, but God never experiences anger like when I lose it, God forbid. That's not what the Torah is describing. Charon af is a very superficial state that is still other-centered, just trying to realizing that a sense of boundary and barrier is what the other person needs. Now I'm even though I'm in a complete state of composure, I'm putting on a frown and I'm raising my voice and I'm telling my 2-year-old, don't play with the stove, it's dangerous. Even though inside I love them, I think it's so cute, I'm not angry. That's the Hebrew word that was mistranslated as anger. It's a conversation, I don't want to go deep into it, but anytime we think that the Torah is describing something where God seems like a human being and has failings and does wrong things, for instance, and now you say, well, okay, we can relate to God because we do wrong things, so does God, so now I can relate to God. By Kabbalah, that's just a misunderstanding of the whole description of the Torah. right? Every time we say God does something as a personification, you really want to strip it of all physical definitions and try and look to the spiritual and also understand the Hebrew, which is often mistranslated, right? But we can talk after. That's a longer conversation. So let's look at this sense of from this perspective, what a complete tzaddik, what their experiences of love. I want to go with the commentary. This requires
explanation. Perhaps the incomplete tzaddik feels no desire for evil because he indeed no longer has any evil, having converted it to good. Why must we say that he only imagines himself to be altogether free of evil? Should I continue?
Sure.
Okay, to explain this, the Alter Rebbe continues with a clarification of the term complete tzaddik, the explanation in brief. As stated in the previous chapter, the complete tzaddik is able to convert his evil to good only by dint of his great love of God, a love known as love of delights. Accordingly, the incomplete tzaddik, who has yet to attain to his lofty level of love, has obviously not accomplished his conversion. Love of delights, then, is the ultimate criterion of where the tzaddik stands vis-a-vis the eradication of his evil.
So, in fact, there's another way of looking at it too that he's describing, which is not that the incomplete tzaddik finally rids himself or herself of that last vestige and then the love of delights comes, but here he's saying the love of delights is actually the tool by which that happens. So I can't speak from personal experience, but we're saying the order is incomplete tzaddik reaches the level of love of delights, and that causes the transformation to complete tzaddik. But also the other dynamic is true, where because they're a complete tzaddik, now they experience the love of delights because there's no them anymore. So it's just for our file that away. Uveyur ha'inyan. The explanation?
Want to continue?
Sure.
Okay. The explanation of the matter is as follows.
כי הנה צדיק אמור שנהפך הרע שלו לטוב, ולכן נקרא צדיק וטוב לו. Can you go ahead? Have you got our spot? Yeah, complete.
Complete tzaddik in whom the evil has been converted into good, and who is consequently called a tzaddik who knows only good, has attained this level by completely removing his filthy garments from evil.
So we have two sets of terms, and just good to know this. This isn't a key piece in our work. You have the complete and incomplete tzaddik, which has to do with attaining this level of complete love, of perfect love of delights. And then you have a tzaddik who knows good and tzaddik who knows evil, and that has to do with the transformation of what the leftovers of nefesh b'mit completely or not completely. Right? So these two sets of names are not just extra names. They're actually talking about two different aspects of the tzaddik, whether the love is love of fire, like fiery coals, or a complete love like love of delights. And then the second aspect being whether the nefesh b'mit traces of it have been completely transformed or not. So that it's not just terms for the sake of terms. They refer to different aspects of the tzaddik. Right? Hu al yidei hasarat habegadim hatzoim legamre mehara. So he's completely removed his filthy garments from evil, which is what we talked about in the last chapter, that the way that those last traces of nefesh b'mit are removed in tzaddik is they no longer have any focus in consciousness that could ignite them. Right? So there's nothing left in the world, there's nothing left they could think of, there's nothing left they could feel that would cause that to ignite. All of its possible focus has been removed, and therefore it's been transformed and become another nefesh elokit. And we bring in another way of defining it, which this is a little challenging for us, so strap your seatbelts on for a moment, right? Because we're all about love, and he's going to bring in another way of defining love, which may challenge us. Dehinu lim'os me'od betanugei olam hazeh lehit'aneg bam betanugot bnei adam.
This means he despises utterly the pleasures of of this world, finding it repugnant to derive from them that pleasure which other people derive.
And he gets a little deeper into this when he gets into, hate is the opposite of love, and we'll talk about it then. But here we're actually leaping to another level, right? We said, for a normal person, there can be triggers in the world that will cause Nefesh B'mit to jump up and start yelling and doing whatever. We know about that. That's life. For an incomplete tzaddik, those moments are just the microphone or the table or the traffic light. I don't walk by the street light and want to eat it or want to yell at it, unless it's maybe a stop sign or a red light. I've yelled at red lights, right? But normally, these are just neutral things. They don't trigger me. But now, if you walked by, and pardon the graphic image here, if you walked by a sidewalk and someone had gotten sick and thrown up on the sidewalk moments later, right? I saw your face go like, ugh, right? Now it's not neutral, right? You don't walk by that throw up on the street and say, it wouldn't occur to me to eat that, right? You're revolted by the idea of eating it. You cross the street to not even have smell it. Everything about it is just repugnant to you. You're actively what the word is, despising it, right? So that's what happens to a complete tzaddik when it comes to any possible self-centered pleasure, even productive pleasures, even perfectly.
Not neutral.
Not for a complete tzaddik, no. That's where the complete tzaddik actually despises it, right? So where I would walk by whatever triggering situation, and I'd say, okay, don't go there, don't think about it, don't do it. A complete tzaddik walking next to me walked by and would wonder what I was getting excited about because they haven't even noticed it. The incomplete tzaddik. Complete tzaddik would take me across the street because they couldn't stand even walking by that phenomenon, and they just despised it. They had, like I would cross the street to not have to step over a puddle of vomit. So something about this complete transformation of the Nefesh B'mit causes the complete tzaddik to not just not be triggered by self-centered activity, but to find it repugnant. And that means even so much as, like we said, I'm sitting down and eating a nice bowl of my wife's lentil stew, which is really tasty. The idea of sitting down and eating it just because I like the taste and give me a second bowl, and all I'm thinking about is how much I'm enjoying it, that phenomenon becomes repugnant to the complete tzaddik, to that extent. Right? So not just they don't want to hurt people, not just they don't want to steal things, not just they don't want to have, okay, do I really need that extra car, that extra chandelier in my bathroom? Not just the obvious getting caught up in materialism, but even the subtle actually becomes repugnant to them. So Sarah, you're frowning for the first time. You have a question?
It doesn't sound like anything we have been talking about, this sense of repugnant. I don't know. I don't know. Don't have words today.
Okay. It's new. This is a new piece. Yeah, we've not talked about it. And also something I can't relate to. I don't think most people can relate to. And also, it's a pretty foreign idea to North American thinking. We're raised to think, I work so I can enjoy life, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with enjoying life, right? I work to have money, and so why don't go see a movie and enjoy it, right? There's no negative. So we've really been conditioned to look at self-centered enjoying life as being, why shouldn't I enjoy life? Here, we're really looking at very, very, very refined work at a conscious level, where I'm trying to take all the energy out of Nefesh B'mit, even that very, very neutral, not damaging, not counterproductive socially. You can't identify it as wrong to sit and eat a bowl of soup, but who's eating the soup? If Nefesh B'mit is eating the soup, in other words, I'm eating it and saying, I love the taste, give me a second, I'm not thinking about, this is going to help me help other people. If that's not my focus, Nefesh B'mit's still around, that's all. It's not hurting anybody.
That's
right?
tough.
It's tough, right? This is not for normal people.
So if they're completely nullified, and wait,
Yeah.
and they are in essence flowing, they're flowing like water. They're flowing
Yeah,
basically like Ein Sof.
yeah.
Then what do they need with any of the material world?
But because they're still in a body. The body needs food.
Granted,
To do-
but in terms of looking for pleasures,
They're not.
that wouldn't make sense.
Right. Right.
So I think they're talking about, despising is really a strong term,
Yeah.
Huge.
but rather it would be easier to understand if you just kind of think of it as an embodiment, a total embodiment of the Ein Sof walking around on this physical plane. What would their material needs be other than sustenance?
Yes,
There wouldn't be
that's more palatable.
pleasure in sustenance.
But there's an element that's really, really splitting hairs that doesn't get it, and that is, right, the reality of the Nefesh Elokit is that there's only one being here, right? That's the reality of Nefesh Elokit. So anything that now says there's another being here, Nefesh Elokit hates that. It really does, because it's saying, oh, you're creating a piece of the universe, and you're saying God's not there. There's a you there, right? And even though it's super, super subtle, all I'm saying is it's just me eating a bowl of soup. Who am I hurting, right? Nefesh Elokit goes and says, but there's a you, right? That you doesn't exist. That you is godliness, and you've taken godliness and you've separated it, and now we're cut off from our source. We're cut off from godliness. So even though it's super, super subtle, and it's not harming anyone, to say that Nefesh Elokit actually gets to a point where it despises that is true, because it's all about Ein Sof, and anything that says there's a piece of the world that's not Ein Sof, and I exist, and there's another being here other than Ein Sof, it hates that, and it doesn't matter how it expresses. It can express it in the most, non-destructive, in the most innocuous way. But now there's another being in the world, and the Ein Sof, that's not Nefesh Elokit's perspective. Now Nefesh B'Mid has now appeared, and Nefesh Elokit hates that. They're in battle. So I hear what you're saying, and it certainly is more palatable, but that's not what he's trying to express, I don't think. It's tricky. We'll revisit this. Yes?
Well, is it end up that somebody who's become a complete tzaddik really should be a hermit?
No. Just the opposite.
Outside world, there's nothing?
That's a non-Jewish ideal, and just the opposite, right? It's the Russia who would benefit from becoming a hermit, because the world is triggering me, the world is a problem for me, and sometimes I need to take time away from this or time away from that, and maybe if I want to take a couple weeks away and go somewhere where I don't encounter this stuff, it's going to help me. A complete tzaddik has no negative urge left, and the world is not a problem for them. They're actually here to help the world. So for them to be a hermit would be counterproductive. They want to go and find where the problems are and where they can help. That's their whole thing. They don't care whether they enjoy it or don't enjoy it. They don't care about whether they grow or don't grow. They're just looking for the next person that needs their help. That's all.
Do they have families?
Yes. In Judaism, tzaddik lives a normal life, and the whole point is they take that flow of godliness and they actually bring it down into physical life, and they eat and they have families and they.
They're able to bring revelations down.
Yeah.
As opposed to us that are trying to move up.
Yeah. So.
And again, if we understand that the only reason we're all here as human beings is to make the world a place that God wants to come to, then we understand the importance of what they're doing.
Yeah. So I like that you guys are a little shocked at this whole thing. A tzaddik it's not, we throw it around, but it's a very, very rare individual.
Can you give us a couple of examples what a complete tzaddik would approve of?
Well, we learn about it every day, the Ten Commandments. They like that, observing the holidays, helping other people, giving charity, learning Torah. Yeah?
You may not want to talk to me about this, but we can talk about it after. I won't be offended. So Joseph is a tzaddik.
Yes.
Why does he cry?
Why does he cry?
If nothing...
Well, he cried because of the destruction of the temple.
Right, a tzaddik doesn't not experience...
No, he's not
So a
crying.
tzaddik does not experience human emotions, right? So he cried to be reunited with his family. He was overcome with emotion, seeing that his family had actually changed.
That's out of character for a tzaddik then, because
To cry?
these things are neutral.
How is tears of emotional joy, how is that out of character for a tzaddik?
Because that's about him.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm not saying that they're not human, right? A tzaddik still experiences emotion. It's just the emotions of the animal soul, of the divine soul. The divine soul experiences emotions, and a tzaddik is still a human. And by the way, they can still make mistakes on their level, right? I mean, there's a story about a real tzaddik. I'm forgetting his name. He had a couple come in. I may be telling the story wrong. I apologize if I'm getting some details wrong. A couple came in, or a gentleman came in who needed a certain amount of money, say 500 rubles or 300 rubles for a wedding, and his daughter couldn't get married without these 500 rubles, whatever the number was. And the tzaddik was thinking, how can I help this person? And then the very next person came in and said, I had a beautiful business deal. I want to give you a donation of exactly that amount, 500 rubles. And the tzaddik said, oh, and he called his assistant and said, call back in that last gentleman that was here. Of course, here's divine providence. I got the exact amount of money that he needs. Let me help him out and fix his problem. Done. But then he stopped and he thought, hold on. I could give this 500 rubles to this one person, but I have this whole crowd of my followers and of villagers out here who need 2 rubles, 5 rubles. I could help many, many more people if I don't give it to this one person, and instead I distribute it to many people. So which is the right one to do? And both is a mitzvah. And he sat and he thought, and finally he realized the one that was his first instinct, the one that flowed with kind of divine providence, the one that was clearly in front of him, that was the right thing to do. Even though you could rationalize, I can help more people if I divide it up. Look, they came in right afterwards, it's the exact amount of money, let's go with my first instinct. Right, so this is a tzaddik, and he had to figure out how do I not make a mistake? And he could have made a mistake. He could have kind of overthought it and not flowed with the highest meaning of that moment. But that wouldn't have not made him a tzaddik, right? He's still just completely other-centric, completely trying to help people around him or her.
How do you know it wouldn't be a mistake? It could have been a mistake if you would have helped more people.
That's right. That's the struggle of a tzaddik,
For sure.
right? So he's not struggling, or she's not struggling to not allow nefesh b'mit to express. Giving to many people or giving to one person, it's all nefesh elokit. It's all a mitzvah. It's all the work of a tzaddik. But still, they have to figure out, and they can make mistakes, right?
It also might be that giving to that person the 500 rubles might be down the road for a greater.
Yes, of course. And there's always a wider view. So, I thought this chapter might be just like kind of go through quickly because it's about tzaddikim, but it's fun, isn't it? I like this conversation.
I still don't get how they can
I know.
be human
Yes.
and have that passion and be net neutral.
Well, neither do I. That's why I'm an ordinary Russia. And if you meet a tzaddik, go ahead and ask them, right?
And we will continue the struggle.
The other thing is,
If it's okay, let's move on a little. Okay. Lemalo tavat haguf bilvad velo lavodat Hashem.
Namely, the pleasure of merely gratifying the physical appetite instead of using this pleasure toward the service of God.
So that's it. Nefesh b'amit is the one that's enjoying it. And to a complete tzaddik, that's actually awful. Well, like, how could there be some aspect of me that thinks it's really there, that it exists, that denies the Ein Sof, even in that subtle way, even for that moment? Ugh, right? They feel about that the way I feel about the repugnant puddle of whatever. Right? And go on physical. And go on in the physical pleasures.
Physical pleasures dedicated to serving God are in fact holy, such as the pleasure of enjoying the Shabbat with food and drink.
Okay.
It is not such pleasure that is repugnant to the tzaddik, but pleasure for the sake of self-indulgence.
Right? So this is where we look at, we're not talking about a hermit. We're not talking about someone that says, oh, I'm only going to eat coarse bread and water, and only what I can survive. They're allowed to actually enjoy. Nefesh Elokit likes enjoying the world, because that's a gift from God, but only doing so because it's Shabbat, and because it'll help them do mitzvahs, and because it'll help them have time with their family, right? So they don't have my experience of, that chocolate cake looks great, I can't wait for dessert, and please give me a second piece. And at that moment, who am I kidding? That's nefesh b'mit eating, right? I don't care if I'm breaking my Yom Kippur fast. Most of the time, when I'm eating a chocolate cake, there's a me, and that me is enjoying the cake. And I'm not thinking, what mitzvahs can I do with this cake? I'm thinking, right? So it's subtle, but for a complete tzaddik, that's at their level, that's really something they'd hate.
well, if you could enjoy something to the ultimate at that moment, and it's done after that. And then go on to do good for others. If you're only concentrating on that chocolate cake day in and day out, every minute of the day, that's a bad thing.
That's another level.
self-centered.
Okay, you're saying so for me, that I would say, okay, if I just have that cake moment where I'm self-centered and then I go on to do good things, yeah, I've actually taken that. Maybe I had a little dip in consciousness, but then I've elevated, and for me that's good. But what for me is good for tzaddik would be a huge descent. So even though it's a subtle blip for tzaddik, they're just 100%, right? So different people have different levels.
So if you were enjoying the lentil stew, to go back to that?
Yeah.
Could you enjoy that because you know, not just because it's a physical taste, but because you know that it's going to feed your body and that will help you do all the good things for God?
Exactly. And in addition to it, we had a whole class I taught about the Kabbalah of eating. I have a relationship with the spark of godly light that's in that soup, and now it's depending on me to elevate it, right? So not only do I recognize it'll give my physical being energy to do mitzvahs, but I'm actually helping those beings, those lentils whose lives I'm ending, right? I'm taking their energy, I'm putting it to my body, and now they become part of me, and when I do good stuff with them, they actually return to their source. That's what kabbalistic tikkun olam is taking sparks of the world that are mine to elevate, and by eating them, opening up a channel with a blessing, and then doing good energy with them afterwards, and being mindful of that while I eat them, and enjoying that whole thing, I'm actually elevating part of the world back to its source. So it's you can go further and further into it. It's a huge practice.
And how about the person who made the lentil stew for you? Do you think of that person as well?
Hopefully, yes. Yeah.
As being part of this tzaddik world?
For sure. If I made a challah for a tzaddik, with good intentions, and then the tzaddik ate it and did good things with it, now I have a share in their energy, and they have me in mind, I have they in mind, and yeah, all these angles.
So he had tears of joy.
I think those were tears of joy, seeing that his family was back, that everybody was alive, that they had grown and learned, that they even amongst themselves regretted what they'd done to him, and that now he saw really that the whole thing had been there for him to prepare Egypt for his family to come in and survive. He saw the whole picture. I mean,
Save the people.
yeah, and then now he knows his father's. I mean, all this stuff he couldn't contain himself. So a tzaddik, nefesh elokit has emotions, and a tzaddik has emotions. They're still human.
Is the intention of this text for us to have this much conversation on what a tzaddik is when there's a good chance that none of us are getting close to that?
It's a good question. Yeah. So this chapter is only here for us to have a compass bearing, because we actually do want to aim at this, right? This is for us to know.
Sure.
Yeah.
But what they're actually experiencing, like I'm just like crossing my mind. I'm not sure I care.
Yes. It's not something we should be disappointed in if we don't reach.
Right, or like feel like emotional about them. Just like, well,
Yeah.
I'll aim at it, but I don't care if they're happy or sad or whatever. Like.
Yeah, it is something of an academic conversation in that only a select few can actually achieve it.
Right.
Also to go back, so it's the responsibility of an individual to distinguish the motivations for eating lentil soup. Like, is that, it just seems like it's on individuals to say, I'm eating this soup just because I like it and it's yummy to me in that moment, or like I'm nourishing my body and this is so I can do better work. So the responsibility is on the individual, or who's the one who is distinguishing the motivations behind our actions for pleasure versus servicing God?
Right, each person for themselves.
Okay.
Right, each person. So it's not my job to look around the world and say, oh, is that person eating because they have an appetite? Is that right? That's just my own nefesh b'meat wanting to maybe feel good or whatever it is. This each person for themselves at their own level will say, okay, this week, when it comes to eating, how did I do? You know what? I didn't eat emotionally like to the extent that I sometimes do. That's good. I can't say that 100% of the time that I ate, I was thinking about how am I going to come to temple and use this energy for good. Not 100%, but look, it crossed my mind. I tried to stay in that. So give myself a 70% this week, and maybe next week I'll go for 71. Right?
It's a self-eval.
Self-eval, yeah. Does that answer your question, Sarah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're saying that Joseph was a tzaddik?
For sure, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Okay, yeah, I know.
away, and I
That's-
get into that.
All right, מפני היותם נמשכים ונשפעים מהקליפה וסטרא אחרא. Oh yeah, go ahead.
He despises such pleasures, for they are derived from and receive their spiritual sustenance from the kilapa and sitra achara.
Okay, the klipa and the sitra achra. So you're gonna really love this next line, right? So that energy, even the subtle energy of me saying, I love lentil stew, let me eat for that reason, that's sitra achra, right? That we define as the other side. Because if there's a me that's eating because I like it, that means there's another being in the universe. And once I say there's another being in the universe, that's not holiness anymore. Holiness is just holiness. There's only one being here, it's Ein Sof, and everything else is nullified in that. Like if I was a candle in the ball of the sun, there'd be no candle flame, right? That's what my soul is. It really is not here, it really is nullified. That's what I am. It's a distortion for me to look at myself and think I'm really here. And if I do, now I moved away from holiness and sitra achra. Doesn't mean I'm hurting anybody. Doesn't mean I'm a bad person. Doesn't mean I could live a perfectly blameless life and get into heaven and have the proper side of the scale be loaded up and nothing on the other side. But it's just there's a little bit of that left. So now I'm part of the other side. Doesn't mean it's horrible, right? And in that moment where that self-centered consciousness pops in, that's sitra achra. And the tzaddik despises that, right? וכל מה שהוא מהסטרא אחרא הצדיק גמור הוא שונאו בתכלית השנאה.
The complete tzaddik utterly hates whatever is of the sitra achra.
Now he uses this word, son'o, actually hates, right? There's not a neutral relationship where the tzaddik is just not interested in, not tempted by. They think about that possibility of, why would I go and work so that I get richer because I want to have more money? They would hate that phenomenon, right? Why would I go and buy a nice car just because it makes me feel good because it's a fancy car? They would hate that phenomenon. Who are they hurting? Nobody, right? I mean, you're allowed to earn money, buy a car. You're allowed to have physical wealth, right?
The people that produce the car.
No,
make a
everybody's,
living
yeah,
because
the hell,
you
it's,
bought that car.
socially this is fine. In terms of halakha, this is fine. No one's breaking any laws.
But isn't hate a very strong emotion that could be from the sitra achra?
Well, this is where we get to a big difference in kind of how the West sees love and how Kabbalah sees love. Because in general, in Western mysticism and spirituality, love is kind of the only thing, right? Really, you want to just love in every direction and love everything, and even if something looks problematic in the world, you just love it, and that's the highest state of being. That's sort of projected out there.
That can get you into a lot of trouble.
Yes, indeed. And if we look at, we're not going to get today, but if you look on 155, he says, for repugnance is as much, sorry, he doesn't say it there. No, he says in the next one. He talks about hate and saying that hate and love are antithetical, right? That they're the opposite of each other. So let's just introduce it, because next time we'll get into it. So for us, we often think love. I'm getting some troubled looks from the room. Let's see if we survive this one. I should just tell a joke and be done.
There'll be a discussion later.
Yeah. So in the West, we think love is basically it. Love is all. But if you look at the tree of life and all the sefirot, you got love, you got chesed, and then you got gevura opposite it. And we say, if you just approach the world with love, you're actually not functioning. You're not balanced. You can't actually, if it's just love, you're actually not going to be able to love anything, truly.
If you're seeing the world as all love,
Yeah. Only a few minutes.
and
Only a few
the
minutes.
other people don't, and they're coming at you, and they will kill you.
Okay.
your children.
I got it.
It's a bad thing.
Yes. So we don't have to go quite that extreme. But that's what we're saying. If I really love something in Kabbalah, I do actually hate something that is opposed to it. Right? Like you said, if I love my family, then that person that, God forbid, tries to break into my house and hurt them, am I in a higher state of mind if I love them also? And I say, well, the world's just an illusion, and really I should love everybody, and love will overcome them and will solve the problem. I mean, it sounds good, But in Kabbalah, they say it's not true. No, if you love your family, something that's trying to hurt them, you actually should hate it. And the degree of hate you feel towards something which is a problem or dangerous or harming your family indicates the level of love you have for your family. And they even go further and say, if I think I love something and I don't hate its opposite, then I haven't completed my love. That love is not connected to me truly. So it's a totally opposite framework than how we look at it in the West, and certainly many Eastern approaches where they say just transcend the world, love in all directions, love for every phenomenon. We say no, if you're flowing in the actual world with that, you can't actually love something if you haven't established a boundary around it, and something that opposes it is a problem for you, right?
You gotta take Hitler.
I'm not going to go to Hitler. Okay. So let me wrap up with this. So that's another aspect. That's another aspect we're going to learn about the tzaddik, is that a tzaddik is not just someone who experiences a love of delights, but also they can be measured by the degree to which they actually hate even subtle phenomenon that oppose godliness, and that's within myself. So that's why I'd say this person is crazy. Why do they hate the idea of eating food just because they like the taste? It's not hurting anybody. That's a crazy statement, but the fact that they actually hate it indicates that their love is complete and that all they want is oneness with God, and their own desires are just, that opposes that will of the divine soul. This has been an amazing class. You guys are great. I'll hang around for Hitler conversations or whatever we want. Good stuff.
All the holidays, religious rituals and things, they're all built around food.
Yes. And that's a big part of what we do. We don't learn about spirituality just to become more and more spiritual. We learn about spirituality to infuse and integrate that into the physical. So eating is a big part of that pathway. We're not eating just because it's a cultural thing. We're eating because that fish on my plate, that's an actual spark of godliness, right? We learned that the world is coming out of spirituality, being projected, being created every moment. That spark of godliness is there for me to elevate, and all the things I've learned and all my intentions will go to raise it higher and higher. So eating, at holidays especially, is one of the most spiritual things we do.
Okay, we'll meet outside.
Darn exciting. Makes my head spin.
Yes,
I like that as part.